When Amara placed her hand on the ancient tree in the heart of the forest, time stood still. She heard a whisper, not from a voice, but from her soul. This wasn't just a dream. It was a memory she had never lived, finally waking up. A forest had waited for centuries just for her to arrive. Do you believe there's a place where nature remembers your name, even if you've never been there? Amara had always been sensitive to the quiet things. The soft rustle of leaves outside her window, the hush of snow falling in the distance, the way a candle flickered when no one was watching. These small, almost invisible moments whispered to her in a language she couldn't name, but somehow always understood. And for as long as she could remember, her dreams had been her truest conversations. But lately, one dream had taken hold of her, nights like a song that refused to end. Each time she closed her eyes, she found herself in the same place, a vast forest blanketed in silver mist. There were no footsteps but her own, no bird song, no rustling, just a soft, sleeping stillness that felt ancient and aching. The trees were tall and motionless, their bark smooth and gray, like forgotten marble statues. The air was cold, but not unkind. And always, always, she felt that something was waiting. At first, she thought it was simply a dream. Beautiful, perhaps, a little strange, but harmless. Then it came again the next night, and again, and again. Amara began waking with the same feeling each morning, an ache she couldn't place, like she had left something behind in that forest, a piece of herself still drifting in the mist. She tried writing about it in her journal. She tried drawing the trees. She even tried ignoring it, busying herself with work errands and phone calls. But nothing softened the pull. Nothing quieted the forest inside her. One night, as she sat by the window with a cup of chamomile tea, her fingers curled tightly around the warm ceramic. She whispered aloud to no one in particular, "Why do you keep calling me?" The room was silent. The tea steamed, and her heart answered with a tremor. By the time the dream returned that night, she no longer resisted. She welcomed it. This time, when she stepped into the dreamscape, something had shifted. The mist was thinner, the air warmer, and far off in the distance, she noticed a faint glow, like a lantern, floating just beyond reach. Amara began to walk, her footsteps making no sound, her breath even and slow. She did not rush. There was no fear, only a curious sort of peace, as though her body knew exactly what to do, even if her mind did not. She followed the glow, but it danced ahead, playful and patient. Every few minutes, it paused, waiting, inviting. Then it moved on again. Amara spoke into the quiet. "I don't know where I'm going, but I trust you." And the forest, though it did not speak, seemed to listen. When she awoke the next morning, Her pillow was damp with tears, not from fear, not from sadness, but from something deeper, a kind of recognition, a remembering. She couldn't explain it, even to herself. All she knew was the dream was not just a dream. It was a message, or maybe even a map. And so, for the first time, Amara decided to follow it in waking life. She pulled out the old backpack from her closet, dusted it off, and began to pack. A notebook, a wool scarf, a small compass that had belonged to her grandmother. She wasn't sure why she felt the need to bring it, but something in her said it would matter. She tucked in a flask of tea and an extra pair of gloves. As she zipped up the bag, her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the quiet thrill of listening to something invisible. Later that day, she drove toward the northern woods, miles away from town, where the trees grew thick and time seemed to slow. She parked near a worn dirt path that wound through the forest and stood still for a long moment. The air smelled of pine and cold stone. A hush blanketed everything. It was almost exactly as she remembered, except now she was awake. The first hour of walking was quiet, uneventful. Birds chirped in the far distance. A squirrel darted up a tree. Leaves crunched softly underfoot. But as Amara pressed deeper into the woods, something began to change. The sounds faded. The wind paused. Even the sun seemed to dim slightly, as though it too was holding its breath. And then she saw it, the same mist from her dreams, silvery and low, curling around the base of the trees like old lace. Her heart pounded gently in her chest, not from fear, but from awe. "You're real," she whispered. The mist parted slightly, as though it were answering. She kept walking until she came to a clearing. In the center stood a single tree, larger than the rest, ancient and silent. Its bark shimmered faintly, almost translucent, as though it were half in this world and half in another. Beneath its boughs, the air was thick with stillness. Sacred. Waiting. Amara stepped closer and reached out her hand, resting her palm lightly against the tree. The moment her skin touched the bark, a warmth spread through her fingers, soft, pulsing, like a heartbeat. And then she heard it, not a voice, not exactly, more like a feeling that formed itself into words inside her chest. "You've returned." Amara closed her eyes. Tears welled again. She didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Amara stood still beneath the ancient tree, her heart suspended in the strange space between dream and waking. Beneath her palm, the bark was still warm, as if a hidden heartbeat pulsed through centuries of silence. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to dissolve into the hush, listening not with her ears, but with something deeper. No one had ever taught her how to listen to a forest. But somehow, this forest had always known how to listen to her. That day passed slowly. The light filtered through gauzy veils of mist, soft as an endless dream. Amara found a low tree nearby, spread her wool blanket, and sat down. She reached into her backpack and pulled out her notebook, flipping to a blank page. Then she began to write. I'm no longer sure if I'm awake or dreaming, but my heart tells me I belong here, not because I understand this place, but because it understands me even before I speak. She paused and looked up. The trees towered overhead, their branches filtering the sunlight into drifting specks of gold. A small bird landed nearby. It didn't sing, just stood watching her, quietly, as if wondering why a human had wandered into such a sacred place. Amara smiled softly. It's all right, she whispered. I'm wondering that too. Night fell like a heavy blanket across the forest. There were no streetlights, no far-off towns, just the dim glow of the moon and the quiet beat of her own heart beneath her wool sweater. Amara pitched her small tent near the great tree, then sat back against her bag, cradling a warm flask of tea. The air was chilly, but not harsh. Everything seemed to be whispering, waiting for something unnamed. As her eyes grew heavy, she didn't dream of light or mist. Not this time. Instead, she saw herself a small girl with tangled hair, sitting beneath a great tree, looking up at the sky with a question still lingering, and then a voice soft as wind brushed through the edges of sleep. Listening is not with the ears. It is with gratitude. The next morning, Amara woke early. No alarm, no buzzing phone, just the gentle wind and the earthy scent of damp leaves. She packed her camp, carefully folded. Her blanket brushed dirt from her boots and followed a narrow path behind the ancient tree. No one pointed the way, yet her steps moved with quiet certainty, as if her feet remembered what her mind had forgotten. With every step, something stirred in the soil, in the roots, and within herself. The deeper she walked, the quieter the forest grew, not silent like emptiness, but full brimming, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Amara felt it clearly now. Each tree was listening to her, not watching, not judging, simply receiving her presence. By midday, she reached a wider glade where massive trees stood in a natural circle. In the center was a single stone slab, smooth and weathered, like countless hands had touched it over the years. Amara sat down, placed her hands on the cool surface, and closed her eyes. No asking, no expecting, just being. And so the forest began to tell its stories. She didn't hear words. There was no voice. But images drifted into her mind, soft waves of memory passing through her like wind through leaves. A young woman in a linen dress running through the forest, her dark hair flying behind her eyes, bright with wonder. A woodsman by a riverside fire, humming an old lullaby to no one. A mother cradling her sleeping child beneath a green canopy, whispering a name long forgotten, scene after scene, person after person. No heroes, no legends, just live-ofs, simple, sacred, real. Amara opened her eyes. Inside her chest was something vast and tender. She was not the first to find this place, and she would not be the last. But today she was the one called to listen. She rose, bowed her head to the circle of trees, and kept walking. She was no longer searching. She didn't need answers. What she needed was to move in rhythm with the silence. That afternoon, she sat by a small stream. The water flowed slowly, the sunlight flickering gold across polished stones. She took off her boots and dipped her feet into the cold current. Her eyes closed. Her thoughts wandered, and in that stillness, she heard the most profound message since she arrived, not with ears, not with words, but as a quiet understanding blooming from within. I never forgot you. Amara opened her eyes, tears rolling freely. She didn't know who I was. The forest, a memory, a part of her soul from some distant life. It didn't matter. What mattered was the feeling real, full tender, as if being wrapped in the arms of a mother she couldn't recall, but somehow always remembered. And that was when she knew the forest wasn't just alive. It was listening. Amara moved deeper into the forest, into places untouched by time or human hand. With each step, the earth beneath her seemed to soften, as if the ground itself was welcoming her with quiet remembrance. The trees here grew closer together, their trunks twisting around one another, like ancient souls whispering forgotten truths. She didn't know where she was going, but here not knowing felt like its own kind of wisdom. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted. The soft forest floor gave way to flat stone slabs, worn smooth and covered in moss. A hidden path appeared natural, yet too deliberate to be accidental, leading downward into a shallow hollow between the trees. The sunlight followed gently, as though even the sun understood it should tread softly here. At the bottom, Amara stopped. Before her stood a small stone structure, half swallowed by thick, tangled roots. There was no grand archway, no soaring roof, just stones stacked with quiet care, draped in ivy and softened by age. And yet, from within it, pulsed a feeling not cold, not eerie, but familiar, like a room she had once fallen asleep in, lifetimes ago. She stepped closer, brushing her fingers along the cool stone. The roots crossed in front of the entrance, like arms folded protectively. She didn't try to force her way inside. Instead, Amara knelt not out of fear, but from a knowing deeper than thought. As her knees touched the mossy stone, she closed her eyes. A soft wind passed through her hair, carrying a scent she couldn't quite name, part damp wood, part memory. And then, as before, a voice rose, not in sound, but from within her. This is not a place to enter. It is a place to remember. Amara opened her eyes. She didn't need to go inside, because what mattered wasn't within walls, but in what had never been loved. She sat on the moss-covered ground, leaned gently against the roots, and placed her hand over her heart. And as she breathed deeply, the images came again. But this time, they were all of her in forms she barely remembered. A young woman in rough linen, carrying a basket of dried flowers, humming softly as she walked among the stones. An elderly figure with silver hair, meditating beneath the roots, face calm as a still lake. A child crawling across the earth, reaching for a leaf, laughing as sunlight danced across her cheeks. All of them were her. All had lived here. No names were remembered, but the forest remembered them all. Amara touched her cheek. Tears were falling, though she hadn't noticed. It wasn't sorrow. It was the feeling of returning, not to a place, not to a person, but to something sacred she hadn't even known was missing. She whispered softly, afraid to disturb the stillness. "Thank you for keeping me, even when I forgot who I was." The wind answered this time warmer, and she knew she had been heard. As the afternoon light faded, Amara rose and stepped away, her movements slow, deliberate. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. That temple now lived inside her, quiet and enduring, like a chapel under the roots of her heart. After walking a while, she came upon a flat stone, just the right size to rest. She lay down and gazed up through the canopy, watching the golden fragments of sunset slip through the leaves. And in that peaceful moment, something settled inside her. The forest did not hold the memories. The memories had chosen the forest to stay. Night arrived. The sounds of evening stirred soft insect calls, wind passing through branches, the quiet shifting of roots deep underground. But nothing felt unfamiliar. It was all a lullaby, a song sung in a tongue older than language, older than thought. It felt like being held. Amara thought, maybe in this world, there are places that ask for no explanation. They ask only to be felt with a gentle presence and an open heart. And this forest, with its hidden temple beneath the roots, was one of those places. Before she drifted off to sleep, she whispered into the darkness, "If I dream tonight, I hope I dream that I'm awake." Then she smiled, pulled her blanket tighter and curled into herself like a child returning home. And the forest, just as it had for centuries, held her quietly, with the warmest silence she had ever known. Amara awoke as dawn tiptoed behind the trees. The first rays of sunlight slipped between the branches like golden threads so delicate she held her breath, afraid to break them. She stayed still on the stone slab, warmed by sleep, wrapped in the peace of a forest that listened even in silence. She hadn't dreamed. Or if she had, the dream was no longer separate from waking. This place had become a living dream, one she now walked with every breath. She gathered her blanket, laced her boots slowly, and moved toward the direction where the light felt strongest. There was no clear path, only her intuition growing steadier with each step since she entered this forest. Along the way, dew fell gently from the leaves onto her shoulders, cool as the touch of living memory. Before long, she reached a small hollow where sunlight pooled like a cradle. And in the center, there was someone sitting still, unmoving, as if made of the very light around her. It was an old woman. Her long white hair fell down her back like a veil woven from mist. She wore a robe crafted from tree bark, shades of earth and ash, so seamlessly blended into the woods that if Amara hadn't looked carefully, she would have thought the woman was part of the forest itself. Amara stepped forward slowly, without fear or doubt. Every part of her knew this woman was who the forest had wanted her to find. The woman opened her eyes. They were bright, not in color, but in clarity, as if they had seen through thousands of seasons without ever losing their gentleness. "You've arrived," the woman said, her voice a soft wind grown old. Amara bowed her head. "I'm not sure why I'm here, but I know I had to come." The woman nodded gently. "You don't need to know. Sometimes knowing hides the truth. What matters is remembering the feeling." Amara sat beside her hands, resting on her knees, her back straight but relaxed, like someone relearning how to sit with the earth. The woman looked up at the sky. "I've been here so long, I no longer count the years, not to guard the forest, but to guard something more precious." Amara turned. "What is it?" The woman didn't answer at once. She kept watching the light shift between branches. The last light, Amara remained silent. Not because she didn't understand, but because something in her heart was rising unnamed and undeniable. "There are places," the woman continued, "where the last light is not the sun, but the light of things not forgotten, of loyalty, of memory, of a love that asks for nothing." Amara whispered, "Like the kind of love you never say aloud." The woman turned to her for the first time, meeting her eyes. Exactly. They didn't speak again for some time. A breeze stirred. A few golden leaves spun down between them, like unspoken messages. Amara felt the sacredness of this place deeper than any temple or shrine. Because here, holiness wasn't born from rituals. It was born from presence. After a while, the woman reached into her robe and pulled out something small. A stone-round, amber-colored glowing, faintly like it carried the sun inside. She placed it in Amara's hand. Keep it, not to find your way, but to remember that you once were the light. Amara closed her fingers around the stone. Warm, like holding an ancient vow. I'll keep walking from here, Amara said quietly, but with strength. The woman nodded. I know. When it's time, you won't need me anymore. The light will find you. Amara stood, bowed deeply. Not like a guest, but like a student who had finally met her teacher. She walked away without looking back. Yet a part of her knew the woman still sat there and would remain there until the world no longer needed someone to remember the last light. The afternoon passed like a ribbon of smoke. Amara found a high ridge where the sunset could be seen in full. She sat down quieter than she had ever been. The stone was still in her pocket, like a second heartbeat, and as the sky melted into orange, then violet, then deep blue, she heard that voice again, not with her ears, but with something deep within her chest. You are the light I've kept. As the last hues of sunset faded from the sky, Amara continued her journey. There was no clear destination, only a soft pull rising from the earth, whispering through the leaves, gliding on the breeze. The sky darkened, but a small flame stayed lit within her, the amber stone resting in her pocket, steady like a second breath. She walked past ancient roots through a slope where the earth was soft, and the scent of moss wrapped around each breath. Gradually, the air around her thickened, not with mist, but with a total stillness. No birds, no breeze, only a silence so deep it felt like the surface of untouched water. And then she saw it. A wide lake lay ahead still as glass surrounded by weeping branches that hung like protective arms over a sleeping dream. Not a ripple, not a falling leaf. Everything seemed to be waiting not for change, but for a recognition. Amara stepped carefully to the edge, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. She knelt and looked into the water. There was no reflection, not from lack of light, but because the surface of the lake did not return her image. She furrowed her brow and reached out fingers, grazing the water. It was cold, smooth, but still nothing appeared. She whispered, "You won't show me." The lake gave no reply, no ripples, no sound, only stillness, as if it were asking the question back. Amara closed her eyes. She understood. This was not a lake meant for self-reflection. This was a lake meant for letting go. She sat down, hands resting gently on her knees. Her breath slowed, softened, like grass swaying under a breeze. Within her, layers of thought began to dissolve like mist over sacred ground. Old questions. Who am I? Where should I go? Am I right or wrong? Sank beneath the surface, unheard, unanswered, unnecessary. And then something began to change. A figure appeared in the water. But it wasn't Amara as she was now. It was a small girl, 8 years old, maybe, with wild hair and wide, teary eyes curled up beneath a tree, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. That child, clearly Amara, was someone long forgotten, left behind in an abandoned memory. Amara's heart ached. She whispered, "I'm sorry for leaving you alone for so long." The child in the water didn't speak, didn't smile. She simply dissolved like smoke, no longer needing to be held. Next came a young woman, stronger, sharper, yet tired. She walked fast through a crowded city, headphones on, eyes glued to her phone. But inside, there was emptiness. Amara nodded. "I remember you. I thought I was strong then, but really, I was just running." That image too vanished. No judgment, no regret. Each memory once seen became free. Finally, the water returned to stillness. No images. And in that emptiness, Amara saw something new. Her true reflection at last. But it wasn't her face. It was a flickering light. Pale, blue-white, like a candle in the wind. No features, no name, no age, just pure light. Tears welled in her eyes. Not from sorrow, but from knowing she had finally seen the part of herself that never disappeared, the part that didn't need a name. When her tears dried, she touched the water once more. This time, a single ripple spread outward, gentle like a farewell blessing. She stood up and bowed to the lake, not as a guest, but as an old friend. And then, from deep within the water, a sound echoed, not into her ears, but into her soul. "I was silent so you could hear yourself." Amara placed her hand over her heart. "And now I have," she whispered. Night descended like deep velvet. Amara set up a small camp near the lake's edge, but she didn't need a fire. She didn't need light, because now she understood true light doesn't come from outside. It lives within. It lives in every image that has dissolved, every memory that has been released, every piece that has been forgiven, without conditions. Before falling asleep, she looked one last time at the lake, and this time she smiled, not needing to see herself anymore, because she had already found herself. When morning light touched Amara's eyelids again, she didn't rush to open them. She lay still by the edge of the lake, her breath light as mist, listening to the dreamlike symphony of the earth. There was no longer a boundary between waking and dreaming, for the forest had become a place where all borders faded. She slowly sat up, stretching like a stream rising after a long night. The air smelled of warm leaves, and the early light wove through the canopy like golden threads sewn into the sky. Amara rose, and for the first time, she didn't wait to be guided. She already knew where she needed to go. The path seemed to form beneath her feet, not with markers or signs, but as though the land remembered her. Towering trees stood all around, ancient and quiet. But one tree made her stop. It was unlike the others. Its trunk was massive. 3 people could not have wrapped their arms around it. Its bark was cracked and ridged like a map etched by time. And on its surface, hidden beneath thick moss, was a carving, a circle with curved grooves like a closed eye. Amara stepped closer, gently pulling back the moss. A door. The door was wooden, weathered, and almost invisible against the tree's body. No handle, no hinges. Yet from where the grains met, a soft warmth pulsed, as if behind that door wasn't hollow wood, but a living memory. Amara placed her hand on it. Immediately, a sensation flowed through her. Not fierce, not foreign, but like hearing a melody she'd once known by heart. She didn't push. She didn't have to. The door opened on its own, slowly, silently. Inside was a narrow, deep space, like a cavern winding down into the earth. But a gentle light lingered from somewhere unseen, just enough to reveal roots spiraling around the walls like living streams. Amara stepped forward. Each footfall made the faintest sound, as though the wooden floor was listening to her heartbeat. After a short walk, the space opened into a round chamber carved into the heart of the tree, or perhaps into the very soul of the forest. At its center stood a low stone pedestal, and upon it a single object, a mirror, not a regular mirror. Its surface was not smooth and glassy, but clouded like a dream lake. Its frame was carved from amethyst, glowing softly like moonlight trapped in stone. Amara approached, and this time she saw herself, but not the self who stood there now. Rather, she saw every version of herself she had ever been, all woven together like a river of memories. The frightened child, the searching girl, the woman who had learned to listen, the quiet light resting by the lake. No image was separate. All of them were one. She reached out and touched the mirror, and then she heard a voice from nowhere, yet from everywhere. You've gone deep enough to remember. You never truly left. Amara closed her eyes. Her breath trembled, not out of fear, but because truth was returning to her like a warm tide. All these years, she thought she was finding her way home, but in truth, every step had been within herself. The mirror did not show the future. It did not reveal fate. It only helped her see clearly the present that had never left the wholeness of her being that life's noise had tried to blur. She opened her eyes and smiled. No more tears, no more weight, only peaceful, like the final drop overflowing the cup. Amara bowed her head to the mirror, not to say goodbye, but to honor it. Then she turned. The way out remained glowing gently, warmly. When she emerged back into the forest, the sunlight had shifted to a golden afternoon hue. The leaves above swayed slightly with the breeze, as if nodding in welcome. But Amara knew it wasn't the forest that had changed. It was her. She no longer felt like a visitor in this sacred place. She was a part of it. Like light is part of the day, like heartbeat is part of being alive. And the door in the ancient tree, the one she had entered, the one where she remembered, would always be there, not to go into again, but to return to. The golden light of sunset slipped through the branches, casting soft ribbons of amber across the forest floor. As Amara stepped out from the ancient tree, everything felt quieter, yet not silent. It was the stillness of something deeply understood. The quiet. After a long, honest conversation, she paused gently, placing her hand over her heart, not to silence it, but to feel its steady rhythm. No longer chasing dreams, no longer afraid of losing her way. It beat now like a sacred hymn from some place before memory. She didn't need a guide anymore because she had become the path. The forest greeted her as one of its own, not a guest, not an explorer, but something once lost that had finally come home. Every leaf, every breath of wind, every distant bird call, they weren't mysteries anymore. They were whispers in a language she once knew forgot and had now remembered. Amara walked with no urgency. She wasn't seeking anything, because what she once searched for was no longer ahead. It was within every step she took. She returned to the lake, that still sacred place where dreams used to trouble her sleep. She sat down in the same patch of grass where her questions had once spilled out like water. Now the lake no longer reflected the sky. It reflected her peace. No ripples, no fog, just clarity, calm and deep. Across the surface, the far edge of the forest shimmered not with sunlight, but with something deeper recognition. It wasn't brighter because the day was longer. It was brighter because her soul was no longer dimmed by fear. She smiled not out of triumph, but gratitude for every moment she'd doubted, for every time she'd turned around, for every shadow that had asked her, "Are you ready to be still?" Because in all of them, she had learned the most important truth. She was never truly lost. A small bird landed near her feet. It didn't chirp. It didn't flinch. It simply stood present and unafraid, like a gentle punctuation at the end of a chapter. Amara watched it, then looked up at the sky, now turning to indigo. The dream she once repeated of forests and whispers and being led by wind had finally come full circle. But the most beautiful part, she no longer needed the wind, because the wind lived in her now. A quiet pull stirred in her heart. Not a call to leave, but a desire to carry the forest with her. She didn't have to choose between staying or going. She had crossed that line where the world outside and the world within became the same place. She would bring the forest into every street, every home, every breath, because what the trees had given her was not direction. It was remembrance, and that kind of gift can never be taken away. Night arrived, like a blanket gently laid across the world. Above the stars appeared one by one, not to dazzle, not to demand, but to remind. Tiny pinpricks of truth shining softly in the dark. Amara lay down by the lake, eyes closed, body relaxed, no thoughts pulling her, no dreams chasing her, just breath, just stillness, just one quiet smile. In that moment, she was no longer a seeker or a wanderer. She was the ground, she was the air, she was the reflection on still water and the roots of trees deep in the earth. She was Amara, the forest, the door, the one who had remembered what the soul never forgets, the one who returned without the wind. And so Amara didn't leave the forest. With answers she left, with something deeper, a knowing, a quiet sense that she belonged not just in the world, but in something sacred, unseen, and eternal. If you've ever felt a whisper in your heart that no one else could hear, perhaps it was the forest calling you too. Let this story rest in your soul tonight, like soft moss under moonlight. Sleep well, and remember, you are never truly lost. You are always being guided. Good night, and may God bless your dreams.